I still remember the day Eliza was born. I was 5 years old, and my mom and dad told me that I was going to be a big sister. Their voices rang with excitement and pride, and I think I felt as though the world around me had suddenly shifted. They said it would be wonderful if I had a best friend for life. Mom smiled, and Dad nodded, as always, confident that everything would turn out just as they dreamed. But they didn't tell me that I would be invisible. No, not completely invisible, but enough to feel that, over time, I would become less and less noticeable. My name is Christina, and I grew up in the Allegretti family. It wasn't just a family, it was a world of perfect lines and rules. A clear hierarchy. Eliza was always at the top, and I was somewhere lower. Like a dog in the house, a loyal and silent companion. Every morning, Mom made Eliza breakfast, 2 eggs sunny side up, a toast cut diagonally, just the way my princess liked it. Eliza was always the princess. As for me, barely brushing the line of her grandeur, I was tossed a box of cereal, and that was it, with no particular care. The difference between us showed everywhere, in every detail. When I needed braces, Dad grumbled and complained about their cost. He thought it was a waste of money. But 2 years later, when Eliza needed braces, money suddenly wasn't a problem. Like a miracle. She even got fancy clear braces that looked like little stars on her teeth. I begged for them, but my requests were met with absent nods. While I stayed unnoticed, she became the center of everything. Every day for her was a celebration, while for me, it was just another ordinary day. Holiday dinners for her were something special, with exotic food, candles, and special congratulations. My birthday, on the other hand, was limited to a supermarket cake and a few friends gathered in the backyard. It always hurt. One day I overheard Mom telling her friend, "Well, Eliza just appreciates these things, more practicality." More practicality. Those words sounded like a sentence, but I didn't say anything. It was too late to change anything. What was worse was watching Eliza change. She started out as a sweet, almost naive child, with whom I built blanket forts and made up silly stories. We laughed, sang songs, and even put on puppet shows, but with every passing year, with each success in school, she became more and more distant from me. And where she once confided her secrets to me, now she only seemed to need Mom and Dad's attention. And they, as always, supported her. "Christina, where's my blue sweater?" Her voice was demanding, almost commanding. She'd enter my room without knocking, as if I were just a part of her world, not a person in my own right. She was like the entourage for whom there were no boundaries. I silently watched as she rummaged through my things as though it were her right. "This is mine," she said. "Mom bought it for me for my birthday." The sweater was mine, but I knew my words would change nothing. Mom intervened again. "Christina, don't be selfish, let your sister borrow it." School became my only refuge, the one place where I was at least a little noticed. I started winning science fairs, getting high grades in AP classes, and a shadow of unspoken ambitions grew on my shoulders, which, however, found no response at home. Eliza, on the other hand, received all the possible applause for her role in the school play. She had only 2 lines, but she got flowers and applause. Meanwhile, I quietly, step by step, built my escape plan. I dreamed that one day they would be proud of me, just as they were of Eliza. When the acceptance letter from the state university came, I thought, maybe, just maybe, now they'll be proud of me. But no. Instead of congratulating me, at dinner that evening, Eliza again took all the attention. She talked about how she won the school council elections in 7th grade. While I, with my modest achievements, remained in the background. And here I am, sitting, and in every word from my family, I hear the echoes of what they consider important. I feel myself disappearing, as if I didn't exist at all. Every visit home was the same. Eliza, her achievements, her successes took center stage. My place on the dean's list? My internship offers? That didn't matter. My life was a shadow standing next to the bright light of her life. I learned to make my visits short and my expectations even shorter. As soon as finals ended at the end of each semester, I didn't stay at my parents' house longer than necessary. Returning to the dorm became my salvation, my little world, where at least my achievements remained my own. There were no eternal comparisons, no constant comparisons to my younger sister's success, her shine, and her flawless image. I lived my life, and that mattered. My first year in college was like the air I'd been searching for. The attention I received had nothing to do with what I had grown accustomed to at home. I could be myself, unburdened by the constant pressure and the shadows of someone else's expectations. But one day, during another semester, someone entered my life who changed everything. I got a message on Facebook that I couldn't take my eyes off of. "Hey, do you remember me? Leon Benconi from Kennedy School. I was a senior when you were a freshman." I didn't remember at first, but when his name resurfaced in my mind, I felt a strange sensation. Yes, I remembered him. A sweet guy who never paid any attention to me. But now we were talking again, and it felt like an unexpected breath of spring on a cold day. We started texting every day. We reminisced about our school years, shared stories from college, and discussed the life paths that, with each letter, seemed to become more and more similar. He had started working as an engineer in our hometown, and something just clicked between us. It felt as though my life with this person had suddenly found an unknown harmony, and I returned home. After getting a job at Turner & Associates as a project manager, I felt my life becoming more real, more tangible. It was my own life, one that didn't require validation from my parents or anyone else. During my first week in the new job, I met Leon for coffee, which, as often happens, turned into dinner. Dinner turned into a date. And soon, into something more. We began looking for an apartment, and it seemed as though happiness and peace had finally found me. The only dark cloud in this happiness was my parents. As always, they didn't notice the significance of the changes in my life. In their world, their main concern was Eliza. "She's having such a hard time adjusting to college," Mom said sadly over the phone. "Not everyone can just breeze through college like you." It was hard for me to hear, but I learned to cope with it. I no longer expected from them what I once had. But I had Leon's family, a real family that appreciated me. Tom and Sarah, his parents, welcomed me warmly as though I were the daughter they never had. His sister Dina became the sister I had always wanted. With every visit, I felt myself sinking into an atmosphere of care, love, and respect. This, however, wasn't at home. Leon and I didn't have the celebrations Eliza did. We just lived happily. Our relationship with Leon developed quickly. 2 years after we met, we had a simple ceremony in his parents' backyard. It was our little wedding, with friends and family, surrounded by our closest people. My parents came, of course, but most of the reception was spent talking about Eliza's summer internship. It seemed inevitable, like background noise, which I had come to accept. My life now had enough bright moments that it didn't bother me as it once did. Life became beautiful, and I truly felt I was succeeding at work, happy in my marriage, and finally had found my family. And when, 2 years after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant, everything seemed perfect. Leon was a loving husband, and the thought of us becoming parents filled me with joy. We were expecting a son, Felix. He was born healthy and beautiful, and Leon turned out to be the father I had always dreamed of. He cared for me and for Felix with such sincerity and warmth that I never doubted our life would always be this way. But something began to change as soon as our son turned 1. Leon started distancing himself. He began staying late at work, canceling our evenings together. I told myself it was just stress, that it was normal for new parents, but deep down I knew it wasn't just fatigue. I felt the gap between us growing. More and more, he spent time at work, and when he was home, his thoughts clearly weren't with me. And then, one ordinary Tuesday evening, when I was feeding Felix in his high chair, Leon came into the room looking as though he hadn't slept in days. His voice trembled as he said, "I need to tell you something." I stopped, feeling my heart clench. He continued, "I met someone else. Her name is Beatty. She's a client at work. And I'm in love with her." The divorce was quick and surprisingly civil. Leon moved to Colorado with Beatty but insisted on paying generous child support. He told me during our last meeting, standing at the door as though expecting some reaction, "I may be a terrible husband, but I won't be a terrible father." Those words echoed in my head like a strange verdict that I couldn't immediately process. I just nodded. And, no matter how he justified his actions, I knew that in this new reality, in our new world, I was alone. But at least I wasn't the same girl who would have cried in response to his cold goodbye. I had learned to live. After signing all the papers, I sat in my lawyer's office, feeling empty. Felix was almost 2 years old, and although he was too young to understand why his dad no longer came home after the divorce, it hurt to see how his little heart kept asking questions to which I couldn't find answers. Why had his world changed? Why did everything change, while he stayed small and helpless? I tried not to show my feelings, but inside, I was angry. However, despite everything that had happened, Leon's family became my lifeline. Tom and Sarah remained grandparents to Felix, and Dina was the best. Every week, when we went to their house, Felix would excitedly rush inside and immediately run to his toy corner they had set up just for him. Tom would sit him on his lap and get down on the floor to play with trucks, while Dina was always ready to come up with something new games or crafts. It all felt so familiar and important to me. I felt that despite all the blows fate had dealt, my son had a loving family and was safe. On the other hand, my parents' home was a completely different story. I tried to visit them from time to time, hoping they would want to build a relationship with their only grandson. But it hurt to watch their indifference. When Felix came over with a new drawing and tried to show it to his grandmother or grandfather, they barely noticed. Mom barely looked up from her magazine, holding back comments like, "Christina, don't let him touch that vase," and kept an eye on him so he wouldn't run too much and scratch the parquet floor. I could see Felix clinging to my leg, sensing the cold atmosphere that filled their house. The contrast became even sharper when Eliza appeared. Dad would light up when she talked about her new job at some trading company. They completely ignored Felix's attempts to show them his latest drawing, instead hanging on every word Eliza said about office politics and client meetings. It felt like a knife to the heart. I couldn't understand why they were behaving this way. These visits became fewer and fewer, and soon I started turning them down altogether. Instead of getting upset over their coldness, I focused on what I could control. My goal became creating a stable, loving home for Felix. I started taking on more challenging projects at work, always striving for new heights. When I was offered the opportunity to lead the project with the Singapore account, my boss warned me that it would be highly risky. "No one has been able to close this deal in 3 years," he said. "Are you sure?" I was sure. I firmly said, "I can do this." And I did. 3 months of late-night video calls across different time zones, hundreds of proposals meticulously thought through. And, in the end, not only did I close the deal, but I doubled it. It was my success. The following projects came one after another, each one strengthening my reputation within the company. I became the go-to person for the most complex clients, and at some point, I was offered a promotion to Senior Director of Client Relations. I had a corner office and a salary that made my eyes water. With each new step in my career, I felt my confidence growing. But none of it could replace the harmony I longed for myself and my son. One day, a few months after my promotion, I decided that it was time for a change in our home. I started looking for a larger apartment, one where Felix could grow, and where I could create a space for him to feel safe and loved. The realtor showed us a beautiful 3-bedroom apartment in an excellent school district, right by a park. Felix was thrilled, running from room to room, pointing out all the new places where he would play, and seemed to have completely forgotten about all the changes that had happened in his life. He was fascinated by the calculator app on my phone, eagerly checking prices for furniture, while I handled mortgage paperwork. That evening, as I tucked him into bed, I already knew we had made the right decision. We were moving to a new home. Are we really going to have a new house with my own room? And your own room? And an art corner? Felix asked as I covered him with his blanket. He gave me a tight hug, and feeling his warm little arms, I understood that this was my goal, to create a place for him where he would feel important, loved, and needed. At that moment, I realized something. Although I couldn't change my past, although I couldn't change my parents' behavior, I could build my own reality, one where Felix was the center of this world. And that reality was mine. It was amazing how quickly everything changed once my promotion and the new apartment were known. My phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Sweetie, we haven't seen you and Felix in a while. Why don't you come over this weekend?" I nearly dropped my coffee. This was the same woman who, for the past 5 years, had barely acknowledged my existence. I thought of Felix, who still asked about his grandparents, and maybe, just maybe, people could change. The next weekend, I decided to take Felix with me. The difference was striking. When we walked in, Dad called out, "My beloved grandson." Felix was their only grandson, which didn't mean much, but still. "Look what Grandma bought you," Mom said, handing him a toy truck, something she'd never bought before. "I baked cookies. You like chocolate chip, right?" she added, smiling. Felix was too young to remember their previous indifference, and was thrilled with everything. I watched as my mom actually got down on the floor to play with him, something I had never seen her do before. "Christina, dear," Mom said later, when Felix was busy with his new truck, "we'd like him to come over more often, maybe for weekends. Sometimes you need a break." It felt surreal. I decided to go along with it. What was that saying about not looking a gift horse in the mouth? Over the next few months, my parents became surprisingly involved. They started asking Felix to stay with them for weekends. I used this time to catch up with Dina. "You look happier," Dina remarked during one of our shopping trips. "More relaxed." I was pleased to see that they had finally made an effort, but I admit I understood why their requests had initially been so modest. Mom needed help with the plumbing bill, and Dad's watch needed repairs. Small things that were easy for me to cover with my new salary. "Of course, I'll help," would say each time, remembering all the dance lessons and summer camps they'd paid for Eliza, but denied me. In some way, it felt nice to be the one they were turning to now. Then I heard about Eliza from the family. "She's doing great, great," Mom said, defending Eliza during one of our new regular family dinners. "Her work at the trading company hasn't gone as planned, she's been overlooked a few times." But in Mom's voice, there was a protective tone, as though she couldn't admit that Eliza hadn't achieved the success they had expected. It reminded me of how they always bet on the older daughter, but at the same time, I felt uncomfortable recalling how I had missed their attention. The requests for money became bigger. A new fridge, home repairs, and then came the big request when Dad said one Sunday, while Felix was upstairs napping, "We were thinking about buying a new car. The payments would be a bit high for us, but with your new position, how much did they say the amount was?" That amount would have made me gasp a year ago, but now it was doable. "We'll pay you back," Mom assured me, but we both knew they wouldn't. Still, I agreed. Maybe it was the validation I was buying, or maybe I just wanted to prove something to myself. Either way, I started sending them a check for the car payment every month. "Just be careful," Dina said to me over coffee when I received the latest request. Money has a way of complicating things. I nodded, but inside I was wondering how complicated it could get. I had more than enough, and if buying my parents' attention meant that Felix would have grandparents in his life, then maybe it was worth it. But I couldn't stop thinking about how often they had been distant and indifferent toward me. Still, Felix was happy. That was obvious. I couldn't let myself break his faith in family, in the idea that grandparents could be good people, despite their past. But I also knew I needed to be careful. I shouldn't let these new relationships turn into a new dependency that they could use for their own comfort. Time would tell where I would end up. It started like any other Tuesday at work. I was in the middle of a presentation for a client when the first wave of pain hit sharply and suddenly, making me grab the edge of the table to keep from falling. My heart raced, and everything went dark before my eyes. I froze, as if everything in the world had suddenly paused. The pain was so intense that there was no strength or time to even comprehend what was happening. It felt like a sharp stab mixed with a searing, unbearable ache, as though something inside me had torn. I could feel my breathing quickening and my skin dampening with cold sweat. "Stay still," I heard someone's voice through the blurry screen of pain. One of my colleagues tried to help, placing a jacket under my back, but I couldn't suppress the scream when the wave of pain hit me again, even stronger. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted nearby. "Tell them she's as pale as a sheet." I couldn't respond, couldn't stand. Everything around me turned into a blurry mess of movements and voices, which faded and grew quieter. The paramedics arrived quickly. They helped me onto the stretcher, and I felt myself being gently lifted. With each passing second, it became harder to focus, and even the smallest details seemed distant and unimportant. However, in that chaotic haze of pain, one crystal-clear thought broke through the fog. Felix. He needed to be picked up from school. In 2 hours, if they could make it. Mom had to help, had to be there. But despite my best efforts to focus, I couldn't shake off the worrying image. An appendectomy was one thing, but what would happen to him? Who would pick him up from school? The diagnosis was quick and final. Appendicitis. "Your appendix needs to come out," the doctor said, immediately starting preparations. "We need to operate urgently. You'll be staying at least 2 days." I tried to respond, but the words came out with difficulty, and my fingers could barely hold on to the phone. "Call Mom," I whispered, handing the phone to the nurse. She helped me dial the number, and I heard a familiar voice on the 4th ring. It was Mom. "Mom," I said, holding back my emotions, trying not to reveal my panic. "I'm in the hospital. It's my appendix. I need urgent surgery. Could you pick up Felix from school? I need someone to look after him for a couple of days while I recover." There was a pause. Then Mom's voice, slightly wary. "Oh, dear, that's impossible. Your father and I are getting ready for a party to celebrate Eliza's promotion." She finally became a junior manager at her company. The pain in my abdomen was nothing compared to the pain that now pierced my chest. I felt a crushing weight on my chest, as if the air was being squeezed out of my lungs. "Mom, please," I said with effort, unable to hold back my desperation. "I need help. Felix needs to be picked up in less than 2 hours. Please." "Well, that's really not our problem," she said, her voice growing cold, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "We're rushing to a restaurant where there will be 50 people. We can't look after kids." "Look after kids." My voice cracked into a scream. "He's your grandson, Mom." My soul was collapsing, and the words echoed in my head. She sighed as if I were being unreasonable, as if I were asking for the impossible. "Felix is your responsibility. He's always so noisy and touching everything. It's really a heavy burden." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A burden? After everything I had done for you? I've been paying your car loan for the past year. Every time you needed money, I helped. I gave everything. And now, when I need help, you say this? I couldn't believe it. How could you be so heartlessly indifferent to someone in need? Mom interrupted me. She laughed, a laugh that slithered into my ears like icy needles. Oh, we won't be taking your charity anymore. It was awful. I couldn't say anything. All my words were stuck in my throat. Eliza's new position comes with a great salary, she continued, as if nothing had happened. She's going to help us instead of you. The line went dead. I lay on the hospital bed, feeling each breath become heavier, as if the bitterness in my chest was suffocating me. I tried to process everything that had happened, but I couldn't. The tears in my ears mixed with the sweat on my face, and I felt how all the months when I had helped them with money, with weekends, when I played the happy family, had slipped away like sand through my fingers. And this is where it had led, when someone better came along. When Eliza entered their lives, the new star, shining brighter than I ever could. Felix and I became inconvenient again, unnecessary, insignificant. I suddenly felt the full weight of this realization. We no longer fit into their picture, didn't belong in their new world, one built on brilliance and luxury, where we no longer had a place. It all seemed so easy for them, so natural, as if I were a useless part of the past, and they had started a new chapter, without me. At moments like this, the pain becomes not just physical, but spiritual. I curled up inside, but before my thoughts could fully consume me, the nurse gently touched my hand, interrupting this painful stream of thoughts. Miss Allegretti, we really need to prepare you for surgery, she said gently but firmly. I nodded, already trying to focus on what needed to be done. The phone trembled in my hands as I dialed Dina's number, trying to regain at least some control with a deep breath. She picked up on the first ring. My voice cracked like a string on a musical instrument when I tried to say the words. Dina, I'm in the hospital. It's appendicitis. They're preparing me for surgery. Could you pick up Felix from school? I hate asking, but... As if there was no hesitation on the other end of the line, her response was immediate. Send me the school info, she interjected, holding back the worry in her voice. What time do I need to pick him up? 2:30, Dina. I'm so sorry to impose, I added, feeling the tension in my body ease a little, though the pain in my abdomen still lingered. Stop it, her voice was calm and firm. Felix is my nephew, of course I'll pick him up. He loves playing with Max, and I'll invite him to stay the week. Don't worry, everything will be fine. I heard her grabbing keys in the background, and in that sound there was something warm that made me breathe a little easier. Thank you, I whispered, feeling tears silently roll down my cheeks, but I couldn't help it. All these years, all this effort, and now I was lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by tubes and white walls, while they celebrated their lives. Yet Dina was here. Unlike the others, she didn't turn away. The next few days I lay, exhausted from the anesthesia, weakened by painkillers, but every morning when I opened my eyes, I felt that Felix was safe. I received a message from Dina as I was just coming to after the surgery. Felix is over the moon. We made pizza and built him a blanket fort. Don't worry about anything except getting better. I sent you some pictures, take a look. Through my half-closed eyes, I saw her messages. Felix with Max, both excited about the new game, Felix surrounded by stuffed animals, asleep among them. My heart filled with gratitude as I looked at these sweet, innocent moments. Felix was in good hands, and that was all I could ask for right now. When I was finally discharged, Dina took me to her place. Felix and I returned to the familiar surroundings. He ran up to me, and I was ready to take him in my arms, but he stopped, remembering that I wasn't alone. Oh, Mom, Aunt Dina let me help make breakfast every morning, and Max slept in my blanket, he said with excitement, and I felt my heart soften from these simple but precious words. Dina helped us settle back home, filled our fridge, and promised to take care of me until I fully recovered. Every day, despite my condition, she brought food and entertained Felix while I rested. She had a way of making each moment a little lighter, a little less burdensome. But one evening, as I sat with my phone checking social media, my eyes fell on dozens of photos from Eliza's promotion party. Mom and Dad were proudly smiling beside her in her designer dress, toasts were being made in the air, and champagne was spilling into glasses. I saw laughter, heard excited voices, as if the sounds were from another world, distant and alien. On the day I was in the hospital, they were celebrating her success. And me? I was the only one who didn't fit into this new world. That evening, Felix didn't push me away like a burden. He slept curled up beside me. I did what I should have done a long time ago. I turned off the automatic monthly transfer to my parents' account for their car payments. And I blocked them on all social media. I couldn't look at those photos anymore, with faces that didn't care, didn't understand. Looking at the pictures where Felix and I were laughing in the park, surrounded by bubbles that Dina's dog Max was chasing, I felt an overwhelming emptiness. I knew everything had changed, and something inside me had changed too, forever. I had tried to buy my parents' love with money and tolerance, but real family doesn't need money. It's not dependent on gifts or gestures. Real family picks you up from the hospital when you can't get on your feet. Real family builds blanket forts with your child, makes you soup when you're feeling off. Real family is not something you can buy. It's built from trust, from time, from care. 3 months passed. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm. After the illness and long days of recovery, I gradually returned to normal. Dina and her parents became regular parts of our lives, and while they didn't replace my own family, they were the ones who filled our weekends with laughter and joy. Barbecues in the backyard, walks in the park, movie nights, those were the moments I hadn't seen since childhood. They brought warmth into our home, the kind I had so sorely missed. And despite my inner disappointment, I began to understand that real family doesn't have to be biological. It can be made of kindness, care, and mutual respect. And so, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, when the world around me seemed calm and leisurely, the phone rang. The number displayed on the screen was my mother's. I stared at it for a while, my hand hovering over the decline button, as if I could avoid the call, avoid everything it might lead to. But in the end, I decided to answer. Her voice was sweet, almost syrupy, the tone she always used when she wanted something, like I was still that child who fell for her manipulations. "How are you, darling?" Her words sounded almost theatrical. I knew that voice. I knew her skill at making me feel guilty, even when I wasn't at fault. "What do you want, Mom?" I asked, trying to suppress my irritation. In my mind, a familiar picture was forming, another request, another moment when I would have to drop everything and once again become the ATM. "Well," she paused, clearly gearing up for a dramatic effect, "since you're asking. Your father and I have run into a situation with the car payment." I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest. It was bitter, almost angry. I held it back, but couldn't completely suppress it. "Oh, really? And what, you thought Eliza would help you with that since she just got a promotion? What did you think? Did she refuse? Can't believe it. She said she has her own expenses." She continued in the same vein, trying to make me feel guilty, as always. "Can you help with the payments while we figure something out?" At that moment, I could no longer hold my emotions in check. They always came to me for help when it was convenient. The irony was almost too much. "Are you serious, Christina?" I couldn't hold back my frustration. 3 months ago, you drove me to the emergency room, and you called my son a burden. You didn't even bother to help us because you were too busy celebrating Eliza's promotion. And now you come to me asking for help with a car payment? The same Eliza who won't give you a dime? You know what's funny? You dared to call him a burden back then, and now you expect me to pay for your negligence. She went silent, and I could feel her face fading from the screen. But I wasn't going to stop. I was only useful when I was paying your bills. And now, when you thought Eliza could replace me as your personal ATM, you turned to me again. I'm not doing this anymore. Felix and I are inconvenient again, aren't we? This is unfair. We always did everything you wanted. And now we're unwanted because someone else is better. My voice trembled, but I kept going, not letting her interrupt. Know what, Mom? I'm not trying to buy your love anymore. I'm tired. I'm tired of watching how you treat my son as if he doesn't matter, as if his love means nothing. And while you chase after Eliza and her successes, forgetting about me, I'm done. Goodbye, Mom. Before hanging up, I made one final move. I blocked her number. Then I blocked Dad's number too, because at that moment, everything became clear. I didn't want to be a part of this theater anymore, where I was used as long as I was useful. Hearing Felix laugh in the backyard, I felt my heart fill with real warmth. He was playing with Max and Dina, they were laughing, and I knew this was real love, real family. In that moment, I realized that all my efforts, all my sacrifices, had meant nothing to people who didn't understand what mattered. But that was in the past now. I had my family, real family, who appreciated me, no matter what. The calls started coming in waves. First it was Mom's phone, then Dad's. When I stopped answering, their voicemail messages alternated, as if they were competing to reach me. From tearful pleas to angry demands, it all sounded like a broken record. Their text messages were no better. Christina, please, we're your parents. This is so selfish of you. We're going to lose the car because of you. I looked at the screen with cold calmness. Each message only confirmed that I had made the right decision. Not one of them mentioned Felix. Not one expressed even the slightest regret about how they had treated us all these years. It was all about them, their needs, their car, their feelings. I felt like I was once again a spectator in the theater of their drama, but this time, I didn't feel obligated to take the stage. After a week of this relentless stream, I blocked their numbers. I set up email filters to send their messages straight to the trash. And I finally felt like I could breathe again. Okay? Dina asked one Sunday afternoon. We were sitting in her parents' backyard, watching Felix and Max chase each other around. Tom was standing by the grill, turning the meat with a serious air, and Sarah was setting the table for our weekly family dinner. I took the lemonade she handed me and nodded. I keep waiting to feel guilty or sad, I said, sipping my drink. But mostly, I just feel free. You gave them more chances than they deserved, she said softly, squeezing my hand. Sometimes, the most helpful thing you can do is leave. Mom, look what Grandpa Tom taught me. Felix shouted, running up with a frisbee in hand. He proudly demonstrated his new trick. Tom immediately left the grill and walked over to help perfect the throw. Sarah, from the patio, shouted encouraging words, and I smiled, watching the moment. This is what family should be like, people who show up not just for holidays, but also when you're truly struggling. People who support you, no matter the circumstances. I didn't know if my parents still had a car, or if Eliza had finally agreed to help them. I didn't know if they were still throwing parties or sitting at home, mourning their ungrateful older daughter. And I didn't want to know. I didn't check their social media, I didn't ask mutual acquaintances about them, and I didn't drive past their house. They were no longer part of my life. But one thing I knew for sure, Felix had never once asked about them since that day. Children instinctively know who truly loves them. He had a family that cared for him, grandparents who never missed a school play, an aunt who built blanket forts with him, and a mom who had finally understood that real love doesn't come with conditions. Last week, he brought home a school project on a family tree. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and he proudly showed me his work. Tom and Sarah were nearby, and Dina and Max not far off. His father had a separate branch, with whom we kept in touch through video calls and visits during holidays. But my parents and Eliza were nowhere to be found. Not at all. "Is this okay, Mommy?" he asked, looking at me with his clear eyes. Miss Johnson said people usually have more relatives. But I told her that these are the only ones we need. I took his hand and smiled, feeling my heart fill with warmth. "This is perfect, sweetheart," I said, looking at the drawing. "Absolutely perfect." I hung it on the refrigerator next to a photo from his last birthday party. In the picture, we were all standing around the cake, laughing, with sincere smiles on every face. It wasn't a perfect world, but it was real. A family that supported us, loved us unconditionally, and accepted us as we were. Sometimes, the family you were born into is not the family you are meant to have. Sometimes, you have to let go of the people who should have loved you, to make room for those who truly do. It took me 32 years to understand this. But watching Felix grow in the midst of real love, I knew it had been worth the wait.